the lane. 15-10. Touchdown, Chargers.
What's up, guys? Welcome into a brand new episode of Chargers Weekly. We are presented by Microsoft Surface. As always, joined by Matt Money Smith. Money, a lot going on in the world of the NFL between the wildcard games, the divisional games coming up, and all of the coaching rumors. A lot of smoke on X. I'll say that this week.
No doubt. And that's, unfortunately, I saw Mike McCarthy. We're doing this Thursday morning. I saw Mike McCarthy's presser. And look, I understand, it's tough. You have families, you got kids. They hear about, what a bad job your dad is doing and that you're going to be plucked out of your school and moved to some other city. And, it comes with a job. Yeah, I can't remember. I think it was Bill Parcells who said it. You get into this business knowing that you're going to get fired. It's just it's a sad reality of the business. And we were talking about this on the radio show with Petros. I think it was yesterday, maybe the day before. It's probably the day before, I think. So, it's interesting what's happened because we're focused on Jim Harbaugh, right? And here's someone that won a national championship at Michigan. And this is someone who was essentially fired for all intents and purposes, like right in that COVID season when they went 2-4, they cut his salary. The rumor was that John had arranged that meeting with the Vikings to try to get a little bit of heat on his brother's name so he could, prove that he's a valuable commodity and Michigan was going to bring him back. Like, that's how capricious this business is. And now he is the most sought-after coach in this coaching cycle. And yet, 3-4 years ago, everybody assumed he was getting canned and no one was going to touch him. And that was it for Jim Harbaugh. And yet here we are. And so I think it's just a reminder of what it's like in the NFL when you decide this is going to be the profession, when you choose this as your profession. It goes with it. Is it fair? Not always. Sometimes, yes. But that's just the reality. The players make too much money. They're too valuable. They're too hard to find. So when things go wrong, the coach ends up wearing it. And that's how we end up in a position where we're in right now, where Bill Belichick has won 6 Super Bowls, is looking for a gig. Mike Vrabel has done arguably the best job in coaching the last 6 years since he's been the head coach in Tennessee, and he's looking for a job. And Jim Harbaugh is now trying to get back into the NFL after getting the boot over 4 seasons in San Francisco, and all he did was take the team to 3 straight championship games and 1 Super Bowl.
Yeah, and Mike McCarthy wins 12 games in each of the last 3 years, and his job was being called for. Nick Sirianni went to a Super Bowl and was 10-1 at one point. His job, as we tape this, is still TBD. So it's not an easy profession. Sometimes you see whatever the coach did last, and that is kind of okay, wow. Like, for instance, Jim Harbaugh just won a national championship. You talk about a hot offensive coordinator like a Ben Johnson. Man, he's leading one of the best offenses in the NFL. So the last thing you see is kind of the gateway into becoming a head coach or moving to another place. And, the Chargers have done a great job, Money, keeping fans up to date with the general manager and head coaching interview process by kind of listing it on X. I couldn't help but notice, though, that the Jim Harbaugh announcement got 5 million views on X. So if that doesn't tell you the interest level among the fans, and obviously they have interviewed a lot of well-qualified candidates at both the GM and the head coaching position, but one name seems to stick out right now as we tape this.
Same thing. Had that conversation about the Instagram, because I stay away from Twitter as much as possible. It's a cesspool. But Instagram,
good idea, by the way.
Likes. Oh yeah, the likes 94,000. It was 97,000 when I had checked to do the story for the radio show. 97,000. The next highest was 15,000. Now I get that Jim Harbaugh is a much bigger name than Steve Wilkes or Mike McDonald, but 97,000 compared to 15,000 is quite drastic. So, I think it's twofold for the Chargers, right? You're in a really tough market. You're in a market with the Lakers, who have LeBron James. You're in a market with the Dodgers, who just signed Shohei Ohtani. And we recognize what the competition, Sean McVay has won a Super Bowl with Matthew Stafford and the Rams. Lincoln Riley has a Heisman Trophy winner in Caleb Williams. It is competitive here. And I can't help but think that that's a big part of the consideration. First thing you need to do is find the right coach, a coach that's going to be the best partner for Justin Herbert, right? And look, alliteration to me is king, right? Belichick and Brady, 2 B's, Herbert and Harbaugh, 2 H's. Let's just make that connection right there and pair them up and let's roll. But I think there is something to be said about having a coach, a head coach, and we've seen it with the Rams. He's the biggest star. McVay is the biggest star on the Rams. He's bigger than Aaron Donald. He's bigger than Cooper Kupp. He's bigger than Matthew Stafford and Puka Nacua. He's the star of the show because he's just dynamic and he wins. So I do think there is something that separates Jim Harbaugh from everybody else that we're talking about in this coaching cycle.
Yeah. And I think Sean McVay shows you, Money, that you can get a coach in a lot of different ways. He was 30 years old, offensive coordinator in Washington when they hired him, and really, unproven as a head coach. He proved it very, very quickly. Harbaugh, on the other hand, coming off a national championship, when you talk about the national headlines and the attention that Jim Harbaugh is going to attract wherever he goes next, you couple that with Justin Herbert, if it is in Los Angeles, SoFi Stadium, a new facility. Football is king in the United States, and you're 100% right when we talk about the Lakers and the Dodgers, the Clippers announcing an all-star game right up the street from SoFi, a new era there in Clipper basketball with stars up and down their roster. But if you can make inroads in this market with Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert, all you got to do is win. And Jim Harbaugh is a proven winner at every level. So that's why there's interest. And I think when we see the franchise quarterback that we think Justin Herbert is, pairing him with somebody who's done nothing but elevate the quarterback position wherever he's gone seems like a no-brainer. Like guys like Mike Macdonald, I think Mike Macdonald's going to be a really good head coach, right? Ben Johnson could be a really, really good head coach, but it's about fit at this moment. And I think if you, I'm
gonna jump in right there though, Chris, because I think you just said it, right? I think we don't know. Yeah. And that's the difference to me in this coaching cycle, right? Is we know Jim Harbaugh's a great coach. We think Mike McDonald's can't afford think.
We can't afford think, right?
That's what I mean, right?
Yeah, no doubt. You can't afford think when the last 3 hires have been first-time head coaches.
I think.
Right? So that's kind of what I think everybody collectively is thinking right now is, can we get a proven commodity? And even if you took Harbaugh out of the equation, you mentioned Mike Vrabel, you mentioned Bill Belichick, Pete Carroll. There's a lot of guys who have done it before, even Dan Quinn to a degree, who went to a Super Bowl, who have been head coaches before. I think that's what this franchise needs, is somebody who has lived through it, who has had adversity, who has had success, and can kind of navigate this franchise into a new era with Herbert under center.
Well, it's cyclical, right? And it's cyclical inside of a team concept, but it's also cyclical in the league as a whole. And you often hear, well, we had a players coach, now we need a disciplinarian. We had the offensive coach, now we need the defensive coach. And that tends to be how it works. It is. Something, you try something, it fails, you swing to the complete opposite side of the spectrum when it comes to the hire. But what's happened in the NFL, and I think it's a course correction, is because of the success that Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan experienced, and they were both hired in the same cycle, it led the NFL to chase. And if anybody has experienced chasing in Vegas, it doesn't end well. You get down on the first day, you're there for 3 more days, and you're chasing it, and before you know it, you're in a heck of a hole. And the NFL started chasing. They were chasing the young, dynamic, well-spoken, can present it, can talk circles around everybody else when it comes to schematics and play calling, and they all wanted it. And that's what everyone was after. And it's been the last 6 years or the last 5 years that we've seen all of these hires be Nick Sirianni, Shane Steichen, Brandon Staley, Brian Daboll, they're all play callers. And now this particular cycle, and I'm not just talking about the names that are being batted around. I mean, just the talking heads, the debate shows, the hot take shows, even when you get into like the NFL radio stuff and the people that have been around it forever, they are now, it is so on point. It is the number one talking point that the NFL owners and general managers became too smitten with a scheme, with a play caller, and did not recognize you need someone to build culture, to set a tone, to make sure the building is right. And that's what I think people realized, that I think we've discussed this here. I feel like we have. That was a huge part, in my opinion, of Brandon Staley's downfall, is his persistence at being perceived as a top play caller and not recognizing that wasn't his job. His job was not to call the defense. He wasn't the defensive coordinator. He was the head coach. And he was so focused on being a great defensive coordinator and calling a great game that he lost, that he didn't see the forest for the trees. And that's what brought him down. And it happens to a ton of them. And I can't, Brian Daboll, when he said, no, I'm not calling plays, I thought it was such, just here's someone that was hired because of how good of a play caller he was and the development he had in Josh Allen. He's like, no, there is way too much to do as a head coach that I can't be worried 7-8 play. When you're a play caller, you got to be thinking about, okay, this is 3rd and 6, but if we get the first down, now I'm already thinking about 1st and 2nd down, and that just gets in the way of everything. Yeah. And so it feels like this cycle, everybody has got back to the most important thing is set the culture, make sure the building is right, hire great assistants, and be a leader of men. And it feels like that's what all of these candidates are this time around.
Yeah, I think Dan Campbell is kind of the blueprint for a lot of people, right? Who kind of lets Ben Johnson do his thing, lets Aaron Glenn do his thing. And the only exception to that rule, Money, it seems like, I'm just going to call it the Mike Shanahan coaching tree, because Sean McVay knows football. He knows ball, and he calls the plays. Kyle Shanahan, learned from his dad who won 2 Super Bowls. He calls the plays, but he knows how to set a culture. And you kind of look at Matt LaFleur right now, calling the plays. Sure. But for some reason, I think that Shanahan tree is like the one exception to the rule. Now you look at like Bobby Slowick right now, who's in that head coaching candidate pool right now. So, but you're right. Like there's a lot of young guys and there's a lot of play callers who seem so singularly focused on the one thing that made them successful. But guess what? There's about 10 things that a head coach is going to have to do. Setting the culture is number one. That's why I love what Jim Harbaugh has done in his career, because his teams are tough, man. Like you don't typically hear about an offensive-minded coach who like leads with physicality and toughness. That's what Jim Harbaugh has done everywhere, from Stanford to San Francisco to Michigan. There's a toughness among his teams. He's played the game, and there's a lot of great coaches who didn't play the game. But I think in the case of a guy like Dan Campbell, who like lived through tough moments and like was in the foxhole as a player. I always give, Coach Lynn a lot of credit. That 12-4 and 9-7 2-year window where he had some success, man, Coach Lynn was a leader of men. And I know it didn't work out here, but I think there's something to be said about a guy who has had a multitude of experiences, including playing in the National Football League. And Jim Harbaugh has been everywhere, and he's as tough as it gets. And I think obviously that's why we keep going back to that name and why fans are so attracted to it.
No doubt. And I think, just to go to your Coach Lynn point, 100%. Players loved him. And he was a leader of men. He got in his own way. He started calling offensive plays. When Shane took over, he wanted a piece of that action. And oftentimes he wanted to be the guy that was calling the plays inside the 20 or critical plays. He was trying to find the perfect play. And we know that one of the knocks on Coach was time management and calling timeouts and when to go for it and when not. And why are we running it on 3rd and 4th? And there was a lot of that. And it's like, I think if you just hire someone that you trust, and you look at some of the names that are available on the offensive side of the ball for Jim Hart. Look, Greg Roman's out there. You know, he was let go by Baltimore. He was replaced by Todd Monken. Obviously, they're experiencing great success, but it's not like Greg coached Lamar Jackson to an MVP season. He was with Jim in San Francisco all those years, coordinating that offense, you know, taking a team to 3 championship games
Money, real
and
quick,
to a Super Bowl.
Greg Roman was a hot head coaching candidate in San Francisco too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because he had Colin Kaepernick, a 2nd-round pick, and they were taking the league by storm. They figured out, like that's the thing about, you know, you mentioned Matt LaFleur and what he was able to do to Dallas. You know, bright offensive mind. Okay, I see what Dan Quinn's doing. I know how to find the soft spots. I'm going to do it, and we're going to tear them up. Maybe they adjust, but until they do, we're going to keep doing this. And he found it, you know, and Mike McCarthy didn't. You know, he just didn't. He was calling the plays, and he couldn't figure it out. So I do think there's value in that, but that's something that – and who did Jim Harbaugh hire to coordinate his defense in San Francisco? Vic Fangio. Didn't care. This guy's larger than life, bigger than me, brought him into Stanford. You know, the guy's most respected defensive coordinator in the league and didn't care. These guys are great coordinators. I'm going to be the head coach. I'm going to run the program. I'm going to set the tone. These guys are going to call the plays. They're going to be able to do it, you know, on each side of the ball. I'll empower them. And that's, you know, and that's kind of, I think, what we've now returned to, as opposed to, oh, I've got to find a head coach on the offensive side of the ball that can develop a quarterback that has a scheme that wins, that's a great play caller. Yes, if you can get Andy Reid, great, great.
Yeah.
You know, but the Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Andy Reids are so few and far between. And I mean, even for all the celebration that we're giving Matt LaFleur, hey man, guy had home field advantage against the 49ers 2 years ago with the best record in the league and couldn't score 14 points. So, like, I appreciate what he was able to do with a rookie quarterback, and there is no hotter quarterback in the league right now than Jordan Love and what he's done the last 8 weeks in the playoff game, no doubt. But let's not forget, success really was not there in the postseason with Aaron Rodgers, with Coach LaFleur. So
Maybe it was a quarterback.
I would love it if it were. You have no idea how much I would love that if it were, Chris, 100%. So I think that's why we keep going back to this one name, you know, and if they had interviewed Bill Belichick or if they had interviewed Mike Vrabel already, I'm sure we'd be talking about that as well. That, hey,
100%.
any of these three, but it does. And that's what leads me to think that look, the guys get paid a ton of money to be right on information. Adam Schefter and Tom Pelissero and Ian Rappaport and Jordan Schultz and all these guys get paid a lot of money to be right. And every single one of them has said the same thing, that it appears as though there is intent on each side to make this happen. And I don't think they're writing that and posting that unless they're hearing it from their sources inside each side of this negotiation.
Yeah, I think Adam Schefter made it very clear that Jim Harbaugh is a big fan of Justin Herbert, right? So, you know,
right.
when that type of information comes out there, right, you just people are excited right now, and like I said, there's a lot of smoke on Twitter, a lot of unreliable sources that are being. Sure. I'm glad you don't go on X Money. I don't think we've talked about that as of late, so it's good.
No, I try to avoid it as best as possible. I enjoy Instagram. I enjoy my interactions there. I find it to be a much more pleasant platform, and Twitter is nothing but a nightmare, complete and total nightmare.
All right, guys, a big thank you to our partner, Microsoft Surface, the official sideline technology provider and laptop of the NFL and the Los Angeles Chargers, that provides players and coaches with the tools to succeed both on and off the field. Check out the powerful Surface Pro 9, combining the power of a laptop with the flexibility of a tablet at surface.com. Hey, I wanted to bring up another name too, kind of in that same vein as Dan Campbell, but man, I think he's going to be an absolute superstar. D'Amico Ryans. Did you see the mic'd up of him talking to the linebacker Ian Cunningham, basically telling him what to do to get a pick six off of Joe Flacco, and boom, you know, and that's the type of play that changes a game. And to your point about just a coach who kind of oversees everything and can put you in a right position to be successful in a pivotal game. Like, Money, we're starting to see kind of a power shift in football right now with all these uncertain head coaches and quarterbacks. You're looking at CJ Stroud, a rookie quarterback and a rookie head coach in their first year to do what they're doing. there's so many young quarterbacks, and then we look at New York and Aaron Rodgers. It just seems like, man, like you guys are way behind the 8 ball right now, because there's a lot of teams in the AFC that you have to contend with. And I don't know if I'd be worried about Aaron Rodgers and the Jets as much as I'd be worried about CJ Stroud and the Texans, or what's going on in the AFC North, all 4 of those teams with Joe Burrow coming back. So it's such an interesting time to be a fan of football. And, the parity is real. And that's why I think Chargers fans should be excited about whoever comes in here. You can turn things around very quickly.
The point you made about D'Amico is very reminiscent of what we used to hear about Bill Belichick.
Yeah.
He wasn't calling the defensive plays. He would set the defense, and he would set the tone in the, over the course of the week of practice. But during the game, you would always hear about how, or in the weeks, in the week leading up to the game, how he would pop his head into the quarterback room and sit with Tom and say, "Hey, I noticed this is what they're doing. Look at this. If you see this look, this is going to be, I know what they're doing here." Like, that's what he's doing during the game, is he's observing. He's not calling the defense. He's busy watching what's going on, and he can figure it out. And that's when he reaches, to the offensive coordinator, whoever, says, "Hey, I see this defense. I know what they're in. This is a winner. This is a winning play." And you hear stories like that all the time about Belichick, because he's watching the big picture. He's not focused on, if this works, I'm going to get him in 3rd and 8. So what's my 3rd and 8 call going to be? But if they gain 3, it's going to be 3rd and 5. And this is what my third. And that's the problem with calling plays, is you miss the big picture. It's too fine a point on it is what you have. So it's a great point about D'Amico, because that's something that, and look, he's a guy that came from Kyle Shanahan, who wants complete control over the offense. And that I understand. He's the best play caller in the NFL. So, Andy Reid, I get. There is a body of work there that shows you're going to take a hit if they're not the ones calling the plays. They're so darn good at it. Same with Sean McVay. So that part I get, but again, there's so many different ways to make this work. And, year in and year out, when you see who makes it to the Super Bowl, look at Nick Sirianni last year, with the Eagles, and Shane Steichen's the one calling the plays, but Sirianni's the one that's overseeing it, and so I think there's a bunch of different ways to do it. Whichever way, that Dean and John, the Spanoses and Ed and everybody decide they're going to go. To me, I just feel like for the last 3, the last 3 coaches, it just feels like it's all lending itself to this one particular destination. And again, that Jim Harbaugh wants to do it. He's got to want to do it. That's the one thing you can't control. You can present him with an offer that you think he can't refuse. You can present him with a roster that includes Justin Herbert, and Rashawn Slater and the number 5 overall pick, and however he wants to approach it with those big 4. If it's a restructure, if it's a trade, if it's a cut, if it's figuring out how to bring all 4 of them back with Khalil, Joey, Keenan, and Mike, there's a lot of options for him that I believe are attractive. And especially if you give him, a big runway, a 5-year runway, something along those lines. And, a 5-year runway that can turn into a 10-year runway if you win a Super Bowl. And you can get settled and you can hang out here and perhaps retire at 70 if everything goes as great as we think it's going to go.
Money, last point by me. And guys, if something happens between now and our next Chargers Weekly, we'll come with a little reactionary pod at some point. I don't know when it's going to be,
100%.
if it's going to be at any time in the next week, but we'll bring you something as things start to develop here. But my last point is really, when you look beyond the head coach, Philly's a great example. They lost Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon, and they suffered down the stretch, right? It's picking the correct coordinators and having an A+ staff behind your head coach. So whoever it's going to be, that's almost like 1A to me. It's like, okay, who are you bringing in to be the offensive coordinator? Who are you bringing in to be the defensive coordinator? And, at this time of year, we see staffs get rated, and, you have to replenish. So that's going to be a very interesting part of this process, is whoever comes in, what is the coaching staff going to look like? And if it's a guy like Harbaugh, we've seen some of his assistants, both at Michigan and in San Francisco. Like you mentioned Fangio, you mentioned Roman. I think Pep Hamilton was in Michigan with him for a stint.
How about David Shaw? He's out of a job right now. David Shaw was his OC at Stanford, and his assistant head coach for 4 years before he took over. So
is it Minter? Minter, the DC there in Michigan? He had a great year. McDonald was there. Mike McDonald was there. So
he was there on loan for a year.
High-quality assistants.
Absolutely. So, I was pulling up all the different interviews, and you look through the general managers, and Terrence Gray, Ian Cunningham, and then just recently Jeff Ireland, Ed Dodds. It seems as though they've pretty much made their way through almost everyone that they've requested. So I don't think they've interviewed Jeff King or Will McClay yet. But outside of that, after yesterday, or I don't know if yesterday was Dodds in Ireland or if it was, I think it was Gray, Ireland, and Dodds were all yesterday. So, with those done, now the only interviews that are left in terms of requests are Raheem Morris, whose Rams were just eliminated, Dan Quinn, whose Cowboys were just eliminated, and then Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, who are still alive. So it does feel like we're at the end of this, because they can, if they want to wait for Ben and Aaron and those guys, they can do that after this weekend in terms of in person if they want to get them out here. So I feel like it's kind of, it's been exhaustive, that's for sure. I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, we're talking about almost 10 general manager candidates. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 head coaching interviews. I mean, they said it was going to be that they were going to have an exhaustive search, and they certainly have. They talked to a lot of people. So where it ends up, nobody knows. It's all, what do it all depends on what you think your team needs at that given moment. Jerry Jones thinks his team needs another year of Mike McCarthy. A lot of people would disagree with that, but that's what he thinks.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe depending on, I hope he sticks around. I hope there's a way for Kellen Moore to be sold on, sticking around and trying to keep this offense very similar to, maybe there's a way that he and the next head coach can work together. But if not, I could totally see Jerry saying, hey, let's bring Kellen back. Let's get this off your plate. And let's, it's something you guys can get a more collab. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's just so many different ways to go about it. And like, that would not surprise me at all. I think Dan Quinn, after that playoff game and the way Matt LaFleur just humiliated him, is going to have a little bit of a struggle here in this head coaching cycle. Fair or not, it's one game.
I know.
Guy coached multiple Pro Bowlers, all pros. He certainly deserves better than what the incoming that he's taking, considering how well his defenses have played in the playoffs in the past, and it was the offense that let the Cowboys down. But, it's
the last thing you see,
it'd be a shame
right?
that that's the case.
It's the last thing you see, and I think that's going to be, no doubt that's going to be a question in Dan Quinn's interview, is what happened last week. What happened?
The big thing, Chris, honestly, is I would assume most owners or president of football operations would say, I can't get this guy out at a press conference. I can't introduce this guy to the fans. After that, we can't sell this. Like we could have. If it would have been a 14-13 Cowboys lose to the Packers, and Dak and Mike McCarthy disappoint again, and no clock management, and Dak threw a pick six, I can sell that.
Yeah.
I can't sell Jordan Love throwing to guys that are wide open, and absolutely demolishing, the Cowboys defense that had been so good all season long, and having zero answers in that game. I think that's a big part of it.
It's tough.
Can I sell this? Can I sell this to our fans, and that are calling for, for change, and give us a lot of money every year, and are heavily invested in this franchise? It's very hard to roll that guy out to a presser right now.
Buddy, just last thing. Outside of Harbaugh, which candidate are you high on? First-time candidate, guy who's been there before? Like, is there another candidate that you because we can think here, that you think could be a really good head coach?
Look, for me, I think we've talked about it. It's it's one of three. And it would be four if he would throw his name in, but he won't because he doesn't want to coach anymore. But it'd be Chris Peterson. I need a winner and I need a leader. And so that's Belichick, Vrabel, Harbaugh. Just to me, that's what this locker room needs. That this franchise needs that. Someone that walks in the door and is viewed as a winning coach, as someone that wins, not someone that coordinated a defense in Baltimore or got the most out of Lamar Jackson in Baltimore in his first season there. It's not that. I feel like we've had that. I mean, Brandon Staley had the number one defense in the league when he showed up, and the press conference, he was dynamic in the press conference. He said all the right things. He got off to a great start. He was this forward-thinking, aggressive, go for it on fourth down. I believe in Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen, and that's why we're going for it, kind of guy. And it was great. Those little moments were great, but the whole was not, And so that's why I think it's such a critical moment for Justin Herbert at 26,
no doubt,
at the start of this extension, prime of the next figure. This coach is going to be with him through his age 30 season. So to me, it is so important to get it right. And I would much rather have someone, even though Mike Vrabel's offenses at times had struggled. He had those two really good seasons with Arthur Smith, where they had a 13-3 record and were the number one seed and had Ryan Tannehill not thrown like 60 interceptions in the game against the Bengals, they would have won and perhaps gone to the Super Bowl that year. They took them to an AFC championship. So I do think there's a little concern about offense with Mike Vrabel and making sure he brings in the right guy. But at the same time, we know it. Heck, we've seen it up close and personal. Saw it this year. Tennessee dragged him into the deep end and sucked him under to get the win in overtime. We saw it last year when they had no business being in that game, and it took a miraculous effort from Justin Herbert at the end of the game to get a game-winning field goal to knock them out. They are such tough teams to deal with. So I would love it if it were one of those two.
Yeah, the preparation and the in-game strategy of Vrabel and Belichick is something that I think this team would benefit from, no doubt. So
yeah.
Steve
Wilkes is interesting, turned around Carolina, got a raw deal in Arizona. He's coordinating a heck of a defense in San Francisco. So that's another one that's interesting to me. Someone that had been a head coach before and his players.
I think Raheem Morris too. I thought Raheem Morris in the
100%.
second half of that game on Saturday night or Sunday night.
Right.
I think that got him a head coaching job.
100%. He's going to get hired.
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to hire the defensive coordinator from the Rams again, though. I think
exactly.
that's the trick there. It's just tough to do the same. It's not the same thing. Raheem Morris has been a head coach. He's been in the league for a long time. He's coordinated defenses for a long time. At the same time, like I said, perception. Oh wait, didn't we just hire the defensive coordinator that had Aaron Donald from the Rams, that had Jalen Ramsey from the Rams? Yeah, didn't we just do that? That's the problem.
There's enough openings that I think Raheem deserves a shot.
He's getting one. I have no doubt. I have no doubt in my mind that he's getting one. I think Ben Johnson's getting one. Raheem Morris is getting one. Mike Vrabel's getting one. Jim Harbaugh's getting one. Bill Belichick's getting one. That's five. Those to me, those five guys, the two coordinators to me that are definitely getting hired are Ben Johnson and Mike McDonald, and I think and Raheem Morris, and then so that's six. Vrabel, Belichick, Harbaugh. Those six guys, I believe, will be hired.
And it's trending Pierce, it seems like, in Vegas.
Yeah, that makes sense. Mark Davis didn't listen to his players when they said they wanted Rich Bisaccia, and he went out on his own and got Josh McDaniels, and it ended horribly. So, and if you're Mark Davis, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, all right, we tried it my way, it failed. Let's try it your way. I'm giving McDaniels $10 million and John Gruden $20 million in coaching salaries. I'm paying out anyway. Might as well see if this works, save a little bit of money without trying to bring in another $15 million a year head coach in Harbaugh or Vrabel or Belichick or something like that. So, and it worked. Their defense went from 26th to 5th, and they went 5-4, and they beat the Chiefs, and they beat the snot out of the Chargers, and they beat the Broncos in the final game of the year. So clearly showed he can coach against Sean Payton and Andy Reid, and showed he did a number on the Chargers. So I think that's probably enough. If I were Mark Davis, I'd say, all right, if Devontae wants him, if Max Crosby is that adamant that he really wants to play for this guy, I'm okay with that. Let's give it a go and see if we can make it work.
Yeah, they'll have to bring in a new quarterback and a offensive coordinator that can put some points on the board, because save for the Thursday night game against the Chargers, they did everything with kind of smoke, not smoke and mirrors, but just defense. Like the offense. Was it the Arrowhead that Aiden O'Connell didn't attempt to pass after the first quarter? Yeah. So like if they get their offense right, who's to say that's not a good hire? And you see,
they lost 3-0 to the Vikings.
Yeah, Vikings, they put up a goose egg. Yeah. Pierce Two Money is like, he's not a proven head coach, but you give him a runway for a year or two to kind of show that he can do it. And, there's really no downside to it, because your locker room wants him.
Yeah, look, I get it. If you're Mark Davis and you're like, wow, I got an opportunity to hire Jim Harbaugh, Mike Vrabel, and I'm going to take a pass because this guy had, an okay 9-game stretch. I get why that's scary, but I think because to me, it's all the Bisaccia thing is what leads you to that point. Like, man, I really stepped in it. I should have kept this guy. The players loved him. They played hard for him. We made the playoffs. We were right there at the end, at the very end of that game against the Bengals. And that's a team that ended up going to the AFC Championship. I should have just listened to him. Kept my coordinators, hired Bisaccia, and see if we can have some continuity. Instead, brought a new guy in. He wrecked Derek Carr, wrecked the franchise. Everybody hated him. Cost me $50 million. It's like,
yeah.
And it's what the people want. It's what the Raiders fans want. They love him, so give him to them. Give it to him. I think there's something to that.
Yep. We could be in a division with, we'll see what the Chargers do, but you got Peyton, you got Reed. It's going to be very interesting, especially with all the head coach movement I mentioned and the quarterback movement, and what's going to happen at the top of the draft, which is another episode, another time for talking about the draft, because we don't know what's going to even happen here. But like the Caleb Williams thing, Caleb Williams entering the NFL draft on the very final hour that you can do it. Like that's intriguing. Like,
well, remember though, CJ Stroud did that last year. So I know everybody's making a big deal about it, but yeah, Stroud did that too. Why? I don't know. Maybe he just liked the attention or something. The idea that somehow he holds any cards is ridiculous. He doesn't. He holds 0 cards. Everyone thought he was going to go back to USC for a $20 million NIL payment. No, it was never going to happen. Oh, he's going to get a percentage of the team. Never going to happen. No chance in the world. You are not. And I think the only thing that could happen is people could just decide that they don't like his attitude, that they don't like his makeup, that they don't think he's a leader of men. And that concerns them. And he drops down behind Drake May and Jaden Daniels. That could happen. Yeah. If his interviews are that bad, and if he has a really bad attitude, potentially that could be a situation. I don't feel like he's that kind of guy. I think he's just gotten some poor advice from the people that he's working with. By all accounts, he seems like a really good teammate, someone who's great in the locker room. It got sideways on him this year. He had nothing left to prove. He had already won the Heisman. He wanted to win a national championship. It went sideways, and there was nothing left for him to do but get hurt. Yeah. He knew he was going to be the number 1 pick. So I get it. That part of it I get. So I think for him, he's going to the Bears. They're not trading out of that pick and keeping Justin Fields. They're not taking Drake May or Jaden Daniels over him unless there is just a huge red flag on character. And I don't foresee that to be the problem. I don't foresee that happening.
They blew out their offensive staff for a reason, right? Like I think it was Rich Eisen who said, like, do you hire Cliff Kingsbury? Probably. You probably do. Right? Like, or somebody that's associated with Caleb that knows him. I don't know. It could be a possibility.
Would make sense. Yeah. Make it as comfortable as possible. Think about what the Ravens did for Lamar Jackson, how they completely built the team around him and played to his strengths. Even though there wasn't incredible success, you can't argue with how great Kyler Murray looked his first couple seasons with Cliff Kingsbury. It was comfortable. It was what he was doing. He thrived. Yeah. So no doubt that, there's something to that. Look when Joe Burrow took off. when they were like, you know what, let's just do what he did at LSU. Let's go empty, 5 out in the pattern, and Joe's fine. He's such a quick decision maker. He's going to find the open guy, and that's what we're going to do. Let's just do it. Let's do what worked for them, at their previous stop. And that's, look at CJ Stroud. The guy's incredible on those intermediate throws. All right, well, let's go sign Dalton Schultz and let's get a ton of these intermediate throws set up for him and just play to his strengths. And that's no doubt. I think you hit it right on the head, Chris. That's probably what they'll do. Hire one of those guys that worked with Caleb, that did great things and helped him win a Heisman, and ease that transition to the pros, especially when you're playing on the freaking shores of Lake Michigan and the wind is howling at -20 and 50 miles an hour.
We got an education on Bears quarterbacks last week from Money, right? So Caleb Williams comes in, best quarterback in Bears history immediately, right?
I mean, he's got a chance to replace old Sid Luckman, Or how about this? You know what? No, I got to pause there.
The 73-0 Sid Luckman.
He's got a chance to come in and be the best quarterback since old number 4, Jim Harbaugh.
There we go.
Yeah,
Let's end there. You know what? I think I said my last point was 20 minutes ago. We just love ball. We can't stop talking about ball, right?
Exactly. Love it. And you know what? I can only hope that the second this thing posts, we got to scrap it and come back and talk about a head coach and general manager that have just been hired. It'd be wonderful to go into the weekend knowing that that's been settled.
It'd be great. And we'll be on standby. Again, if anything happens between now and our next Chargers Weekly, we'll come at you early with our immediate reaction to head coach, GM, whatever could possibly happen. So, Money, looking forward to that. Love this episode with you. And for Money, I'm Chris. This has been Chargers Weekly.